Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Trek Politics. I'm Mary Trump here with my friend and co-host Bob Seska. Hey, Bob, how's it going?
It's going great, Mary. Thank you so much. Looking forward to talking about Journey to Babel.
Yes, Babel, not Babel, which is what most of us would have thought. But, you know, Shatner's going to Shatner, I suppose.
Exactly right. I think I'm entirely blaming William Shatner for that one. So we're going with Babel, Mary.
We're going with Babel, and this is Season 2, Episode 10. Let's dive in.
Incoming transmission.
Trek Politics with Mary L. Trump and Bob Seska.
So, Bob, there's actually a lot of psychodrama in this episode. We have 3 distinct storylines. So if you could just sum up for everybody what's going on, and we can jump in from there.
Okay, first of all, this is a DC Fontana script. So that's one of the things that once you see that name appear on screen, boy, you're in for something great. So here we find the Enterprise hosting a group of dignitaries en route to the neutral planetoid called Babel to decide whether to admit a new planet to the Federation. But everything, of course, goes sideways when a Tellarite delegate is murdered and Spock's father, Sarek, is blamed for the assassination. Meantime, the Enterprise is repeatedly attacked by a mysterious enemy. Who killed the Tellarite, and will Spock make amends with his father? As always, Mary, spoilers ahead.
Yes, indeed. I highly recommend you watch this episode before listening to our discussion, because there is a lot going on, and it's the kind of thing where you want to be familiar with the storyline. Otherwise, our conversation isn't going to make much sense either. And as I said, there is so much happening in narratively and dramatically. We have a father-son drama between Spock and Sarek, who actually act like they don't even know each other at the beginning of the episode. And of course, his mother, his human mother, Amanda, has a thing or two to say. We are, as you mentioned, on the Enterprise heading for a diplomatic mission to decide whether the Corden system should be brought into the Federation, because they have a lot of dilithium, but an underpopulated planet that's at great risk. And obviously being part of the Federation would protect not just the interests of those who seek dilithium, but also the people in the Corden system.
Yes.
We also have the intrigue of somebody trying to upend the diplomatic mission. And in the midst of all of it, Ambassador Sarek gets gravely ill and needs a blood transfusion from the only person on the ship able to give it to him, Spock, who, will he or won't he?
Right. In fact, if I were to give this episode a subtitle, Mary, it'd be Journey to Babel. When it rains, it pours. Because everything happens at the same time to the Enterprise, aboard the Enterprise. You've got a murder mystery in there. I don't know where you land on Journey to Babel, Mary, but this is one of my favorite TOS episodes. It involves actual in-universe politics, some Federation political history. It's also, as I said, a murder mystery. Takes place entirely on the Enterprise, which is something that's important to both of us. And Spock's parents, Sarek and Amanda, are featured characters in this. What more do you want from a TOS episode? So, and by the way, it's not allegorical. There's not a whole lot of political allegory in this. It's just a straight up politics episode. It's about the politics of the Federation and the process of, as you said, inducting Corden into, which is rich with dilithium, into the Federation, and some motives there to mess up the entire process through this political assassination. So there it is. I mean, it's, again, lots going on, but man, it's a good episode, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a great episode. Only falls short for me, not enough Uhura, Scotty, Sulu, or Chekhov. But, you know, you can't have everything. I do think that it is incredibly rich in terms of teaching us about the Federation. And there's an interesting scene between Sarek and Kirk in which Sarek claims that one of his problems with the Federation is that they too often rely on force. And Kirk states explicitly that is always our last resort. So it's nice to have that clarified. And then, of course, we have the very rich history of Spock and his family, which I think helps explain a lot about who he is as a person and how he moves through the world, a world in which, as his mother said, he's neither Vulcan nor human. And of course, the analogy there is to any American who has the experience of being mixed race and how that is very difficult to negotiate. I also really do appreciate the focus on diplomacy as a vital tool for making the universe or the galaxy a more safe, democratic place. Because clearly this is a diplomatic mission, and the Federation is very much on the side of keeping the people in the coordinate system safe and making sure that their resources don't get exploited.
That's exactly right. And we find out later that there's some piracy going on where Corridon is being raided for its dilithium. And that's going to be one of the animating elements in this story, which is how we get to this assassination of the Tellarite Gev. Is it Gef? Gaff?
I think it's Gav.
Gav, yes. And so that's the through line throughout this episode, is unraveling this murder mystery while trying to save Spock's father, Sarek, and then to reunite father and son. And along those lines, Mary, got to pay tribute to the great Jane Wyatt as Amanda Grayson. She was one of the Hollywood actors to be blacklisted as an alleged communist during the McCarthy era after protesting against the House Un-American Activities Committee back in 1951. Wow. And so her career kind of took a downturn after that for many years. She ended up landing Father Knows Best, the TV series. And then, of course, by the time they shot Journey to Babel, she played Amanda Grayson. And she's so kind and nurturing for Spock. I always feel sad for her because her affection can't really be reciprocated by either her husband or her son. And so that puts her in this kind of phantom zone of empathy and affection, knowing that she loves both of these men, but that love can't be reciprocated by either of them. But, I just love that scene. There's a great scene in this. This episode is just loaded with heart, and Jane Wyatt, Amanda Grayson, brings that heart. There's that scene with Spock and Amanda in Spock's quarters where she describes how Spock was bullied by the other Vulcan children when he was 5 years old, kind of puts all of the pointy ear jokes into perspective that we've talked about on Trek Politics, the sort of the anti-Vulcan racism. When you learn that Spock was bullied as a child because he's mixed species, then when you hear McCoy and sometimes even Kirk himself, pointing out, oh, you're a pointy-eared bastard, it really makes you feel extra bad for Spock. And so it also, by the way, calls to mind that scene in Star Trek 2009 when we actually see that bullying take place. But yeah, at the core of this episode is that heart, that family story between Amanda, Sarek, and Spock that I think was really, really super effective.
Yeah, I think Jane Wyatt was wonderful. It's a lovely, deep, nuanced performance. Mark Leonard as Sarek also gave an incredible performance. And there's a lot of pain there. Which is not something that you expect when you're talking about a Vulcan family. And as for Amanda's role, I've always wondered about that. This is a human person marrying, obviously with deliberate intent, marrying a man who is by definition very restrained and unemotional. He's Vulcan, so as advertised. So I've always wondered, okay, so what is it about, what qualities in her are attracted to that? And just from a psychological perspective, is she maybe a little schizoid? Is she maybe somebody who doesn't like strong shows of emotion and is quite comfortable, generally speaking, in that kind of situation. But then, as you say, there are limits to that too, because she is human after all. She has a temper. She feels the lack of reciprocity on occasion. She is, despite the fact that she is aware of how logic drives the Vulcan culture and Vulcan behavior, she is horrified, outraged, and deeply hurt when Spock chooses to do his duty as a acting captain, because, just to add more drama, Kirk is stabbed in the middle of this episode.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Yeah. How could we forget? So Kirk is basically unable to be in charge of the Enterprise during this very tricky mission. Spock, as second in command, takes over. Sarek desperately needs a blood transfusion from Spock, and Spock is told it's now or never, or he's going to die. And Spock, very logically, and I think his father would have approved, chooses to remain acting captain and does not make himself available. And that's when we see Amanda's veneer crack. And I thought it was powerful and actually kind of cruel.
Yeah, I challenge anyone to not feel total empathy for Spock, especially after Amanda wallops him in Spock's quarters. I mean, that shot of him pressing his hand to the door after she leaves, just enraged with him, is heart-wrenching.
It is.
And again, Spock's not a character who needs to exude some form of emotion for you to feel empathy for him. But knowing his backstory, knowing how his mother let him have what for in that situation, really makes you feel for Spock. And going back to what you were saying too about what Amanda may have seen in Sarek to be attracted enough to him to marry him, perhaps Amanda had really unstable parents, maybe absent parents, and to run into someone like Sarek, who is logical and powerful and has that level of emotional and is able to comport himself with stability, maybe was appealing to her, even though he couldn't necessarily reciprocate the emotion. But maybe that's not necessarily something she was looking for in him. And maybe these other qualities completely superseded that for her.
Yeah, I think that's a very good theory, because if she did come from a family that was very volatile and in which she never felt like she was in control, that would be a logical choice to make.
Yes, right.
So again, I think that aspect of this episode was one of the most powerful in the whole series.
Yeah, very much so. My only gripe with this episode is that in the 23rd century, Mary, there's no known way to treat a Vulcan heart attack. I thought that was kind of odd. I mean, bones aside, it seems like Vulcans would have the technology to easily do it by this point. I mean, maybe they should have made Sarek's condition more of a rarity, like he's got some sort of rare virus that they can't figure out. So that's my only real nitpick with the storyline here.
Yeah, I agree with you. And also, how wildly irresponsible is it for the chief medical officer not to understand how the physiology of the first officer works? I mean,
very good point.
I actually said at one point, Google it, for God's sake.
It seems to me that kind of information would be readily available in case Spock has a heart attack. I think this is a really good point you just made. Yeah, I mean, he's a young guy. I mean, as Vulcans go, he's relatively young. And so there's always the possibility, though, that something could go haywire, or I mean, Vulcans being members of the Federation, there's always the possibility that there are going to be Vulcan dignitaries. Maybe you should have that information on hand, Bones, somewhere, instead of just going, I don't know what to do here. Haven't figured this out yet.
Oh, wait, there are hearts over there? Yeah, it's just, I agree with you that it's just unacceptable. And another thing about this episode, and it's not about this episode in general, it just reminded me of a problem I have with the way Vulcans are treated throughout Star Trek. Just because you had mentioned earlier how certainly McCoy and sometimes Kirk even engages in, you half-breed, green-blooded, whatever, as if those are perfectly acceptable things to say. But Kirk and Amanda are having a conversation, and Kirk is just incapable of using anything other than the human experience as a frame of reference. Always, always in Star Trek, the be-all, end-all is to be human. And we see that throughout every series, and certainly the early movies, in Kirk's eulogy to Spock. He's the most human person he's ever met, as if that's a compliment, and Spock would not take it as one.
And we kind of see this with Data, too, in The Next Generation, where the goal is to be human rather than to be his own unique species. I think that comes from the fact that Star Trek is allegorical to the overall human experience. And it kind of, in fact, I think I may have mentioned this in the first Trek Politics panel we did at Star Trek Las Vegas, where I talked about how, all of the alien species kind of look a little human. That was a practicality thing, but it was also part of the idea that this is a story about humanity and not necessarily a story about alien cultures, I guess, from a allegorical perspective. But still, it calls into question the notion that maybe they should have allowed Spock to develop himself as a character, not necessarily in the mode of Vulcan or human and striving to be more human or expecting him to be more human. Maybe it should have been accepted that because he contains DNA of both species, that he's something new, and then that should be celebrated. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think it's very much a problem of the time. So I'm not suggesting that this is a unique deficit in terms of Star Trek. Star Trek does yeoman's work in confronting things like racism and maybe not so good on misogyny, but still tries on occasion. So it was just an observation more than a criticism. But again, overall, one of the great original series episodes, which brings us to my favorite segment of the show, Bobservations.
Okay, well, first of all, Mary, our friend Mike Sussman, who's responsible for Star Trek United, is credited with being the writer who established the charter members of the Federation based on his knowledge of this episode, Journey to Babel. In response to a question from Brannon Braga during production on an episode of Enterprise, Sussman named the Vulcans, humans, Andorians, and Tellarites as the founding members of the Federation, and that became established canon from that point forward. But it wasn't until production on that episode of Enterprise when that was actually solidified. So it's kind of an amazing thing that it went decades through Star Trek canon without that sort of thing being established. Meantime, let's talk about the little people with the gold skin and fezzes in the conference room / cafeteria area. In my headcanon, Mary, these guys are TOS versions of Ferengis. So if you think about it this way, as with the Klingons in the original series, there wasn't a budget for the elaborate makeup effects that we saw from the motion picture Forward with the Klingons. So in my nerdy brain, I imagined that this is what the Ferengi looked like before they could afford the makeup we came to know in TNG and beyond. It's just a fun way to link TOS with the Berman era shows. But according to Memory Alpha, the little golden guys are called Ithanites, based on an unshot scene in an Enterprise episode called Terra Prime. And so they're never named, but there was a scene that they had planned. I think Manny Koto wrote this episode where they wanted to incorporate the little golden guys. They never got around to it. But I think in the process of that, they called them Ithanites. But of course, it wasn't on screen, so I can still stick with my headcanon. We also know that the Ferengi surreptitiously encountered humans in 2151, which is more than 100 years prior to the TOS area. Official first contact wasn't until 2364, but I'm going to stick with my headcanon on this one, Mary. I'm just going to say the little golden guys, those are Ferengi.
I always trust the Bob headcanon, always.
So, some funny Bones things from this episode. When Sarek arrives and issues the Vulcan hand gesture, Bones doesn't even try to reciprocate.
He can't be bothered.
Right. He just kind of looks down at his right hand as if to say, not even going to bother trying.
Oh, well.
Nope, I can't do it. It's too painful to do it.
Well, also, what he says first of all, it's season 2, episode 10. I find it a little hard to believe that they're just having this conversation for the first time. But McCoy says to Spock, so how do you do that Vulcan salute thing again? And Spock does that. And McCoy is like, oh, that hurts more than my uniform. Like, does it really? And then, yes, he can't. It's like, whatever, Sarek.
Yeah. When the time comes, he's just not even bothering. It's just hilarious to me. And so while we're talking about Bones, I've never seen him happier than when he learns Spock had a teddy bear as a child. He was just so thrilled at hearing that news. And of course, the Vulcan teddy bear is a selot, which you might recall one of these mentioned again in the Strange New Worlds episode called The Selot Who Ate Its Tail, which is one of my favorite episodes from season 3 of SNW. Oh, and one last Bones thing, Mary. When he's operating on Sarek, there's visible smoke emerging from the incision. So what is Bones doing that produced smoke coming out of Sarek's body?
Cauterizing him? I don't know that I want to know.
So there's a random and gratuitous shot of Kirk without his shirt on in this episode. So I just want to point out kudos to Shatner of that era, clearly keeping up with his CrossFit routine and eating whatever it is, 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight, because he was kind of ripped in those days, for sure. So I just wanted to mention that. Yes, it is a famous Kirk shirtless scene, which I guess contractually had to be worked into as many episodes as possible. So now, speaking of that, when fighting the Andorian, Kirk does a crazy move where he jumps up and ricochets off the wall feet first. I don't know if you notice this, Mary. It's one of the most awesome Kirk fight moves this side of arena, fighting the Gorn. And when it wasn't, and it wasn't a stuntman, by the way, it was Shatner all the way. He leapt up, bounced off the wall with his feet, and then just landed on the ground, completely missing the Andorian. There was no way. I mean, that had to have hurt. According to Memory Alpha, though, for some unknown reason, just after Kirk's failed wall kick, there's a comical sound effect of a coconut conk being heard. But in the remastered edition of this episode on Paramount Plus, this effect has been removed from the fight. So the only way you can hear that coconut conk, that kind of Hanna-Barbera sound effect, is if you have a copy of the original version, the pre-remastered version of Journey to Babel. Also, per Memory Alpha, when Mark Leonard was cast as Sarek for this episode, he was 43 years old, only 7 years older than Leonard Nimoy was when they shot Journey to Babel, but playing his father. And finally, Mary, returning to a point of discussion from our episode about A Taste of Armageddon, there's a theory floating around in the comments under that episode on YouTube that General Order 24, which allows Starfleet to commit planetary genocide, is merely a bluff by Captain Kirk. So in the episode we talked about in the prior edition of Trek Politics, was Captain Kirk bluffing about the existence of General Order 24? I mean, there was nothing said or done that indicated a bluff, but given how extreme it is, it very well could be. In fact, even though I don't think it was, I kind of want it to be a bluff because it makes no sense as an actual thing. Again, we return to the conversation about why would Starfleet have something like General Order 24 on the books? And so, yes, maybe we should embrace the idea of it being just a Captain Kirk bluff, but it's not the only time it's ever been brought up in Star Trek canon. So who knows? But
something that I think is, I wanted to just point out, because it was another, I think it was an indication that despite their centering of the human Kirk and McCoy do understand Spock pretty well, and that they understand that Spock will not help his father if he feels that the ship and the mission are in danger and he should be in charge. So they come up with a ruse to convince Spock that Kirk is just fine, thank you very much, and he can go ahead and help with that, even though Kirk is in a lot of pain and probably shouldn't be moving.
Yeah.
So I found that moving as well. What I found funny about it, though, is that when things start heating up with the ship that turns out to be the Andorian imposters ship, it's almost like Kirk totally forgets about the fact that he's injured and everything's just fine. So
that's right.
You know.
Yeah. And I love how when he goes to sickbay, when Kirk is in sickbay and he's clearly been injured and recuperating, that he continues to wear his pants and his boots.
Very successful episode, consistently ranked one of the best Star Trek original series and Star Trek episodes overall, which I think is well deserved.
Yes, absolutely. And again, it's one of those episodes that if I'm really hankering to watch a TOS episode, this is one that's in my upper echelon of preferences. Like, okay, well, maybe I'll look at Journey to Babel again because this is great. And I know I'm going to be satisfied with this one because it covers all the things, Mary, as we've discussed here, the murder mystery, the political intrigue. It's got the heart, the family drama going on. There's a medical drama, a medical emergency in it. Plus Kirk gets stabbed and does that crazy ricochet thing off the wall with or without the coconut conch.
And also, of course, shirtless Kirk. This was amazing. Thank you, everybody, for being with us today. We are not going to be here next Saturday, the Saturday after Thanksgiving, because, people need time off sometimes. So we will be back, I believe it's December 6th. I think that's the first Saturday in December. Everybody, in the meantime, please have an amazing holiday season wherever you go. And please stay safe and be kind. And we will see you soon.